What's going on, everybody? It's Ty the TV Guy here, and in this video, I want to talk about the main characters in Vince Gilligan's two brilliant creations, hit TV series Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Both shows feature now iconic characters that will stand the test of time as a couple of the most well-portrayed and complex characters in television history. Not only do I want to compare Walter White and Saul Goodman because they're both creations of Vince Gilligan and they'll therefore inherently be compared, but because I think they actually have a lot of similarities while still holding key differences that are worth noting in analyzing their characters and the story they help tell. Both come from humble beginnings and eventually lead a life down a path of destruction, whereafter they wind up paying the price in the end in more ways than one. I think on surface level, these characters appear very different. These two have almost completely opposite personalities, live very different lives before they enter the drug empire, and they have different approaches to their craft as well. However, I think Walt and Saul have more in common than everyone realizes. So my job in this video is essentially to compare and contrast these two iconic characters. If you love Breaking Bad and or Better Call Saul, hit this video with a like and subscribe to my channel for more TV content. So first, let's take a look at Walter White. Walt is a rather mild-mannered high school chemistry teacher that grows into a powerful drug kingpin. However, this change, like most, doesn't happen overnight. A quote that Walt uses to describe chemistry in the first episode can also be applied to his character. The quote goes, "It is growth, then decay, then transformation." As a result of him growing his life as a criminal and manifesting the Heisenberg alter ego, his family life, public image, and health began to decay. This process fuels the transformation from a weak-willed, middle-of-the-row average Joe to a powerful drug producer and New Mexico's most wanted. Along the way, there are many moments you can point to as far as when Walt officially broke bad. But I think the show's title in the present tense, Breaking Bad, more accurately explains Walter, actually. I don't think there is a certain point that he breaks bad necessarily. You could say it's the moment he approaches Jesse about being his partner. You could say it's the moment he beats up the guys picking on his son in the clothing store. You could say it's when he kills Crazy 8. You could say it's when he stands up to Tuco and commands his respect. Or you could argue he was never all that good in the first place. The fact is, Walter White has both sides of himself within him throughout the entirety of the show. He has the old Walt and the new Walt taking on the persona of Heisenberg. The process of growing into Heisenberg and of blurring the lines between the two is one that points to the fact that nobody is entirely good or bad. One thing that separates Walt from many other characters and makes him the quintessential antihero is his relatability. Because of Bryan Cranston's incredible portrayal of the character, the audience understood his actions and their motives no matter how evil he became. Whether it be to provide for his family, to save his life in highly dangerous situations, or despite his former colleagues, his actions almost always seem to feel justified, despite the questions of morality and the horrific nature of some of these actions. Even in lower intensity moments, Walt has a way of manipulating and lying in a way that makes sense. No matter the scenario, he would always frame the situation as if he was doing it to protect something or someone, to serve a bigger purpose, or out of necessity. When these situations are posed, it makes us feel as if his actions, despite their moral ambiguity, are mostly justified. However, there are many moments late in the show that push this envelope, and the true evil of Walt begins to rear its ugly head in a clearer light. Though he makes choices that seem unredeemable, he maintains a compelling mystique that keeps the audience infatuated with him throughout. As for Jimmy McGill, his backstory is a bit different. He grew up around his father, who is described as naive and gullible in Better Call Saul. A look into his childhood showed him learning to take advantage of weakness, even if he found it in someone like his father. Stealing from his father earned him the nickname Slippin' Jimmy, as his older brother Chuck often refers to him throughout the first 3 seasons. In his adult life, Jimmy struggles financially, living paycheck to paycheck, driving a beater car, and even living and running his business out of the back of a nail salon for quite some time. The real key factor, though, is his brother Chuck McGill. Though I didn't really enjoy Chuck as a character, I recognize him as the most crucial piece in explaining Jimmy's motivations. At many points, Chuck belittles Jimmy, reducing him to only being as good as his worst moments. From where I sit, it seems to me that much of Saul's journey is a quest to prove Chuck wrong, to prove that he can be successful and that he can make as much money, win just as many cases, and gain just as much of a reputation as Chuck did. His method of doing this was much different, and as the show goes on, he shifts from a well-meaning but struggling lawyer to a morally compromised one who finds success through shady practices. The stunts he pulls get more and more ridiculous, and he ropes more and more people into his questionable legal decisions as time goes on. Though I still think he ultimately failed to make Chuck proud, as he falls right into the Slippin' Jimmy mantra in his career, I do believe his original goal was to earn that respect from his brother. As for Walter White, one of the main factors was his old company, Gray Matter Technologies. As we slowly get more information about his relationship with Elliot Schwartz and this company throughout the show, we come to realize that Walt never got over his departure from the company and believes he has gotten the short end of the stick in life, as the company skyrocketed to success shortly after he sold his share to Elliot. Walter says, "It was my hard work, my research, and you and Elliot made millions off of it," when talking to Elliot's wife. This is a pivotal part of Walter's character that doesn't get spoken of enough in my opinion. To me, when he sees an opportunity to make money with a life of crime, one of the real motivating factors behind that was chasing the riches and glory that he never reaped the rewards of for his efforts with Gray Matter Technologies. Yes, Walt originally wanted to pay for his cancer treatments on his own merit, and I do believe for a short while he also saw an opportunity to provide generational wealth for his family, albeit in a rather untraditional way. But I think for a large portion of the show, especially for the portion in which I think Walt had truly broke bad, he was using his skills to chase the power, wealth, and respect that he thought he always deserved. Missing out on the Gray Matter success left a void in him, and the life of crime as a meth cook came along as a sufficient, though much more morally reprehensible, replacement. To me, the key is that Walter White also wanted respect. As I see it, this is a key similarity between Walt and Saul. Yes, they are very different, but to me, more than ego, more than out of necessity, more than for the people they love, they did it for themselves, and they did it for respect. Respect from his family for Walt, as he had a relatively modest job as a school teacher and didn't make an impressive amount of money. Many of his close family and friends viewed him as a softie, if you will, which is highlighted by the way Hank treats him early in the show. As for Jimmy, he wants to earn that respect from his brother Chuck, as Chuck never believed in him, and at least through the portrayal of the show, was the only family Jimmy really still had around. I do believe that both attempted to enter their respective shady careers with relatively good intentions to start, but at a certain point, they got beyond wanting respect from just the people closest to them. I think they even wanted more respect in a broader sense from the world at large. This leads me into my next similarity, which I already mentioned within the conversation about respect, which is that they both ended up doing it for themselves. Of course, this idea comes full circle in Breaking Bad with Walter's iconic line, "I did it for me." The thing is, both of these characters had multiple opportunities to stop their criminal activity and change their ways. Walt and Saul had a choice, and they both chose the life they ended up having. More specifically, I think they both did it for the thrill. It made each of them feel alive. Take a look at Saul in his most animated and excitable state. It was always when he was pulling a con, twisting a lie, or putting on a show to rip someone off or back his way out of a precarious situation. This cycle of lies and deception made him money, it earned him some clout, but most importantly, it gave him that thrill, and it made him feel alive, just as Walt describes his experience as Heisenberg. Saul had every opportunity to turn away from his cheeky ripoffs, and he knew that his continued involvement in such shenanigans would jeopardize his relationship with Kim Wexler, which somehow lasted as long as it did in the show. No matter who he and Walter hurt, they continued their criminal activity, almost as if they didn't have a choice. But they both did. They did it for the thrill, and because they were so good at what they did, they thought they were invincible. Next, let's explore how both of their arcs led them to a life of crime, and ultimately to take on a whole new alter ego. This is perhaps the most obvious example of how these two are alike, as they both label themselves with a new moniker to represent their life of crime. For each of them, the new moniker wasn't just a second name. It wasn't just to keep their identity unknown or to attract certain clientele. The names Heisenberg and Saul Goodman represented something much deeper. It was the uncovering of a new version of themselves, a version that left all their moral considerations in the dust, a version that allowed them to separate from their old lives and start a life of crime. That's what became scary about these characters, especially in Walt's case. It didn't feel like they were merely playing up these characters to achieve their goals. They truly turned into their alter egos through and through and enveloped themselves in this new world that they willingly explored. We all know that it gets to a point that both of them are almost unrecognizable in their new forms, and the name switch really puts the nail on the head to drive this point home. Keep in mind, as I prefaced in the introduction of this video, there are many differences between Walt and Saul, don't get me wrong. I realized that Walt's descent from grace was more extreme and surprising, as he was truly a well-respected and seemingly innocent high school teacher. Jimmy certainly had some of this in him from the start, but it still amazes me just how far he's willing to take things come the later stages of Better Call Saul, and it disappointed me oftentimes because I saw Jimmy have good intentions at many points early on in this show. To me, their descents are both so clearly tied to their new monikers and taking on that new persona, which is yet another similarity between the two. As my last point, I'm going to group two things into one, which is each character's survival instincts and how they play into their manipulation. Both characters are super manipulative, but of course they put their own spin on it. Walter uses his intellect and persona to control those around him and mold each situation into his favor or save face, whereas Saul relies on his charm and knowledge of legal loopholes to get what he wants. I mean, how many times did we see Walt just barely convince Gus he was still the guy he needed? Or how many times did we see him rope Jesse back into the game? Or with Saul, how many times did he explain his way smoothly out of a situation, or straight up rip someone off? Really just for the fun of it and because he could. It's too many to count, and these are all prime examples of master manipulation. This point kind of summarizes my whole reason for making this comparison in the first place. Though they have different backgrounds, personalities, and motives, the actual journey they go on and the path they take to becoming morally reprehensible characters is quite similar in some regards. To conclude, I think Walter White and Saul Goodman have more similarities than people think. Their journeys and actions on their path to a life of crime, evading the law, and hiding the truth can be paralleled in many ways. Though I wanted to root for both men for the longest time, they both pass a point of no return in the later stages of their shows. I think most viewers battle this internal conflict when watching Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, as part of you loves the character and believes they will turn it around. And it's not just that you believe in them. Neither of these characters are simple or linear. They are very complex, nuanced, and layered people who make good and bad choices relative to their current situation throughout the entirety of the shows. That is part of what makes it so difficult to understand these characters, and yet another element that makes them comparable. Hopefully some of you agree with my assessment of their similarities and differences. I thought it was quite fun to take a look at how the main protagonist turned antagonist in both Vince Gilligan's shows is connected. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and let me know if you notice any more striking similarities, or if you completely disagree with my assessment. Thanks everyone for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.